You won't believe what's finally come out of Buckingham Palace after all these years of silence. For so long, people wondered what was really happening behind those heavy palace doors, why everyone acted like nothing was wrong, why no one said a word about Harry, Meghan, and their children. And then, out of nowhere, everything changed. News from inside the palace confirmed official documents had been written, signed, and sealed. Not drafts, not discussions, not whispers, these were final orders. Orders that would change everything for two children who had no idea how deeply they were tangled in their parents' choices, Archie and Lilibet. According to those who've actually seen the documents, the message was painfully clear. Their right to be called royal was gone. Not postponed, not reconsidered, gone. Just like that. The moment those words were officially written, all that palace silence suddenly made sense. They hadn't been ignoring Harry and Meghan's interviews, their podcasts, or the endless headlines they were waiting calmly, quietly, and absolutely certain that the rule book of the monarchy would do all the talking for them. But to understand how the palace could make such a cold, final decision, you have to go back more than a century. Long before Meghan ever met Harry, long before those children were even dreams in their parents' minds, a rule book had already been written, one that still controls the royal bloodline to this very day. It was 1917. The world was at war, empires were collapsing, and the British royal family was desperate to protect its identity from confusion, fake heirs, and political chaos. King George V decided to draw a line no king had dared to draw before. He wrote, in official legal words, exactly who could and could not be called a prince or princess. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't about tradition. It became law. That document was called the Letters Patent, and it's been the foundation of royal identity ever since. Inside it were 3 unbreakable rules. First, the child must come from a legitimate royal family line, no unclear ancestry, no question marks. Second, the birth had to be officially recognized by the crown, not through press releases or private statements, but by royal household records. And third, the child had to be baptized in the Church of England, officially by the crown's chosen clergy. These weren't flexible guidelines, they were absolute, created to protect the family from the very thing it feared most, disorder. For more than 100 years, every royal baby followed those rules perfectly, until Archie came along, and suddenly, the cracks began to show. Archie's birth in 2019 should have been one of those shining, happy moments, smiling parents, cameras flashing, history being made. And on the surface, that's exactly what it looked like. But behind the scenes, buried in legal paperwork that was supposed to be permanent, something strange happened. His birth certificate was changed. At first, it looked completely normal. Rachel, Meghan Markle, mother, everything proper, everything correct. Then, quietly, without public explanation, her full name vanished and was replaced by Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. Now, birth certificates aren't school essays. You don't just erase and edit them. They're supposed to be locked forever. So when that change appeared, alarms went off behind palace walls. Meghan claimed the palace made her do it. Palace staff claimed Meghan demanded it. Both sides denied each other's story, and the truth was buried under layers of PR statements. But the damage was already done. A royal birth record had been tampered with. And once doubt touches a royal record, it spreads, it grows, it creates cracks that eventually split everything apart. By the time Lilibet was born in 2021, the palace had already learned one lesson: silence can scream louder than any press statement. Everyone expected the familiar royal routine, the official doctors, the palace announcement, the ceremonial photo call, but none of that happened. Lilibet's birth was announced thousands of miles away in sunny California through a cheerful press release. No royal seal, no Buckingham Palace confirmation, no official witnesses or records. It looked polished and modern, but to the royal institution, it was something else entirely. It was a message, a quiet, calculated message. We are not claiming this. To the public, it seemed harmless. One baby born in Britain, one in America. But to the crown, it was monumental. For the first time in modern history, a Windsor child had been born outside the official royal record. That wasn't seen as an accident, it was seen as rebellion. And then came what insiders call the baptism problem. Meghan proudly talked about her daughter's baptism in California, the happiness, the family photos, the beautiful ceremony. But behind palace walls, it triggered absolute panic. Because to the royal system, a baptism isn't just a family celebration. It's one of the legal requirements of the 1,917 letters patent the moment a child is formally tied to the crown, the church, and centuries of royal tradition. But when researchers checked the records of the Church of England, they found nothing. No registration, no confirmation. To the crown, that baptism never existed. To Harry and Meghan, it was a precious family moment. To the royal institution, it was a ghost ceremony invisible in the eyes of royal law. And that, insiders say, sealed Lilibet's fate. Without a recognized baptism, the child was officially outside the royal system. Not out of cruelty, but out of procedure. Cold, bureaucratic, final procedure. The palace saw it as a mistake that couldn't be undone. From then on, Lilibet and Archie stood between two worlds, celebrated in America, forgotten in Britain. And while the cracks spread silently, another, more personal storm was building. Harry, the prince who swore he'd left royal life behind, started to call the palace again. Not for money, not for media, but for his children. Sources say those calls weren't formal or scripted. They were emotional, desperate. He begged the palace to reconsider, to put Archie and Lilibet back into the royal record, to give them the titles he believed they were owed by blood. To Harry, this wasn't about ego. It was about legacy, the one thing he thought he could preserve even after stepping away. He believed he could walk away from royal duty but still raise royal heirs, but the response he got broke him. One palace insider allegedly said to him, "This is not about emotion. This is about order, family line, and the future of the crown." That was it. Cold, sharp, and final. That was the moment, they say. Harry realized he wasn't just the prince who walked away, he had become the father whose children were being erased. When the palace made its decision, it didn't make noise. It acted with terrifying quietness, the kind of quiet that only ancient institutions can manage. No press conferences, no TV statements, no leaks, just action. Legal, silent, irreversible action. According to those close to the situation, the results were devastating. Archie and Lilibet were officially stripped of everything that tied them to the royal system. No royal titles, no ceremonial roles, no public duties. No mention in the line of succession. Their names removed or blocked from official legal orders. No royal-funded security, their protection left entirely to their parents. And, worst of all, no permanent record in the royal archives, the books that last centuries. Their names were gone from the pages of history that every other royal child had been written into. In the royal world, titles aren't just names. They're keys that open doors to legacy, privilege, and belonging. Without them, even a royal-born child becomes ordinary. And that's exactly what those final orders did. They made Archie and Lilibet ordinary, not as punishment, not out of anger, but simply as the rulebook demanded. Inside Buckingham Palace, this wasn't seen as cruelty. It was seen as compliance. The monarchy, they say, doesn't act with feelings. It acts with rules. Once the decision was made, nothing could change it. And so, the palace stayed silent. No official statements, no arguments, no corrections. Because the crown understands something that the rest of the world forgets. Silence is power. Silence is control. Silence is how the monarchy speaks. They watched Meghan's interviews. They saw the documentaries. They heard the podcasts. But they said nothing. Because they didn't need to. Their response was already written. Not in words, but in history books, or rather, in the absence of two names. Power to the royal family is not proven by noise. It's proven by finality. And when the time came, the crown acted like it always has. Quietly, swiftly, and completely. It erased titles. It rewrote documents. It removed names from the order of succession, all without a single public statement. And in that silence, the message was clear: the crown does not bend. Not for personalities, not for celebrity, not for public sympathy. And once the crown decides to erase you, you aren't a rebel, you aren't a threat, you aren't even a chapter. You're simply gone. That's what happened to Archie and Lilibet. Gone from the royal record, gone from the centuries-old story of the Windsors. Their lives will go on, they'll be loved, protected, raised freely by parents who adore them. But their names will not appear in the books that outlast every scandal, every interview, every lifetime. Those pages, the pages that hold the weight of royal eternity, will be blank where their names should have been. And that, insiders say, is the palace's final message. Not shouted from balconies, not tweeted, not announced on national TV, but whispered through absence. The silence itself is the punishment. The silence itself is the answer. When you look at Buckingham Palace now, it stands as calm as ever. Tourists snap photos, the guards change, the flags rise and fall. But behind that calm, behind those stone walls, decisions have been made that no amount of public sympathy can undo. The rules were followed. The bloodline remains protected. The story continues just without two names that once held so much hope. And perhaps that's the most chilling part of all. Because in the royal world, erasure isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, final, permanent. Archie and Lilibet will grow up in California, sunshine, free from royal duties, free from scrutiny, free from palace politics. They'll know love, comfort, and peace. But when history is written, when future generations trace the lineage of the British monarchy, their names won't be there. They'll live in memory, in media, in stories like this one. But not in the royal record. That's how the crown speaks. Not through anger, not through retaliation, but through the one language it has mastered for over 1,000 years, silence. Because in the end, silence is not weakness. Silence is the crown's final weapon. And for Harry and Meghan, that silence has spoken louder than any interview, any documentary, any book could ever dream to. The decision has been made. The door is closed. And the message is clear. Once you step outside the royal circle, you don't get to rewrite the rules. You don't get to come back. You don't get to keep the titles. You become a story told in whispers, not written in history. And as Buckingham Palace stands untouched by the noise outside, one truth remains. In the royal world, words fade, headlines die, but silence lasts forever. That's all for today's Royal Daily Report. Remember to stay tuned because in this world, every silence hides a story waiting to be uncovered.